Do you believe that there's such a thing as a work-life balance?
No, I don't. I think that's a goofy thing that we've created in a reaction to the factory system that would, suck the life out of us 6 days a week, and we carry that on into our own businesses. And a good man works hard, and it's one of those badges of honors that we carry with us. If you own your own business or you're a senior leader, you just work yourself to death. It's just part of the deal. And then we have to talk about having balance. A lot of senior leaders in organizations I talk to, they constantly talk about this thing called margins, that we want to have time in the margin. And that by itself speaks volume. You've got the content, which is business, and in the margins, you might get a little time on the edges for yourself. It's nonsense. First of all, I would suggest we talk about an integrated life.
Yeah.
Whatever you're doing, you should be completely sold out to it. If you're on vacation, you should be completely sold out to it. If you're at your kid's soccer game, you're sold out to that. If you're at work, you're sold out to that. And there's no balance in any of that. It's actually integration. And secondly, there will be times where one of those things can take over everything else. Think of it.
Yep, absolutely.
All you have to do is ask yourself, give me an example of one great leader, any person in humanity that has ever made a giant impact in the world around them that lived a balanced life. From Mahatma Gandhi to Jesus to Margaret Thatcher to you name it, none of these people lived balanced lives. Get over it. The difference would be that there's a time for every season. I got offered to run a company and own a piece of it. They were just going to give me a piece of this company and a big fat salary in the 90s. And there's no way I could do it because I was completely out of balance in raising kids. And there was no way that I had the time and energy to take that on. Today, I'm completely out of balance in the way of work. My kids are 35 and 30. My wife works in the business. And so don't think about balance. Think about impact and seasons of life and an integrated life.
Hello, and you are listening to Bill Murphy's Red Zone podcast. I interview leaders who inspire me in the areas of exponential technologies, business innovation, entrepreneurship, thought leadership, enterprise IT security, neuroscience, philosophy, personal development, and more. Welcome to the show. Welcome to episode number 48. I'm your host, Bill Murphy, and I'm continuing my search to find and interview the best people that I can who will offer you inspiration and challenge your thinking in areas related to building exponential organizations, solving complex problems, people who are cutting edge in their thinking related to the brain, human potential, enterprise IT security, creativity, and the application of principles that work and will benefit you so that you can be the best you can be in business and in life. I'm excited to bring to you my interview with Chuck Blakeman. He's a successful entrepreneur, best-selling business author, and world-renowned business advisor who's built 10 businesses in 7 industries and 4 continents, and now uses his experience to advise others. His company, Crankset Group, provides outcome-based mentoring and peer advisory for business leaders worldwide. So back to my concept, I believe that reading books, you can get exposed to amazing ideas. And he's written 2 great books, which I've loved. One is called Making Money is Killing Your Business. And the second is Why Employees Are a Bad Idea, both of which have been number 1 and top 10 rated business books. So Chuck's ideas, his writing, and his philosophy are thought-provoking. And he's published works in New York Times, Entrepreneur Magazine, Success Magazine, and my favorite, which is his articles published on Inc.com, which is current and weekly. You can just go there and check them out. They're really fun to read. If you're an entrepreneur or a senior leader in a business, you'll find Chuck's message inspiring, refreshing, and relieving. This is my second discussion with him, and I like him because he's a practitioner and a doer, not just a thinker and a theoretician. So some of the major takeaways from this episode are the concept of freedom mapping and the importance of asking the question why for the things you're doing. Also, how to develop significance as a part of your success formula, avoiding being a hostage to your business or in your business. Also, is there such a thing as work-life balance? The tyranny of urgent versus important. The difference between learning and education for adults and why adults suck at education. The importance of groups to support your growth. in the importance of EQ, emotional intelligence, for the future. We talk about his most gifted books and the importance of taking risks. So I have all this linked up in the show notes at redzonetech.net/podcasts. This episode is sponsored by the CIO Scoreboard. Are you looking for a way to fight off auditors, communicate with your IT security strategy, your execution and planning? Do you have a way to simply, defensively, holistically, and logically report this plan to your boss, the board, or your team? There is one tool that can do this, and it is the CIO Scoreboard. Check out visualcio.com to learn more. Again, that is visualcio.com. Thank you for listening. Now on with the show, and I want to welcome you to my discussion with Chuck Blakeman. I want to welcome you to the show today.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, Bill.
So I have got to ask you a couple questions. So regarding reading some of your blog posts, and I know that you have owned and operated, is it 5 or 8? I've seen different numbers, or 10 businesses in your career.
It depends on who you ask. But the story we like to tell that we think is true is 10 businesses in 7 industries on 3 continents.
Now, did you always know that you were going to be an entrepreneur?
No, but I did know that I was always going to be unemployable. Right out of high school, I thought if there were 525 kids in my graduating class and if there were 524 jobs, I'd be the last man standing. So I didn't have any kind of view of what I'd be able to do. I knew that it never dawned on me that I'd be working for myself or building companies, but it certainly was at the same time daunting to me to think about why anyone would ever hire me.
Why do you feel that you were unemployable? I mean, I share that same belief about myself.
Yeah.
But what was an indicator for you that was true?
One indicator would be that I did so badly in school that on the day of graduation, not the last day of school, 3 or 4 days later on the day of graduation, they had me in the principal's office discussing whether they would let me graduate or not. That's how bad my grades were. And I think they finally decided they would let me graduate because they realized if they didn't, they'd have to have me for a whole nother year. So they wanted to get me out of there. So I just didn't do well. I'm left-handed. I'm right-brained. I probably have one of those strings of letters, like ADHD or DMX or ABC or whatever it is. I wasn't diagnosed for any of that stuff. And the only thing I was diagnosed for was left-handedness. And I think I've always had a different view of the world. I'm musical. I went to music school. So I just had an artsy-fartsy left or right-brained view of the world, and school completely escaped me. I had no idea what I was doing there. So based on the fact that you're supposed to have even reasonable grades and at least get along, I assumed that I was a complete failure and I didn't have anything going for me.
Did you have any indicators like maybe lemonade stand or a lawn mowing business or something
Nope.
like that maybe were early clues?
Never had a business, didn't do well in sports, didn't play sports after 8th grade. The only thing going for me was that I played clarinet in the orchestra. I didn't like bands, so I played clarinet in the orchestra. And in my senior year, I really only started playing in like my sophomore year. In my senior year, I won a competition to play a concerto with the Toledo Symphony. And that was like, well, maybe I can do music. So that's why I went to music school, because I knew I couldn't do anything else. So I thought I'd at least try that. And then it was just a series of things over the years as I did stuff. I surprised myself that I could actually pull it off, and I gained confidence. But that was a 10 or 15 year thing. I started my own business in my mid to late 20s, but even then I was pretty sure it was going to be a failure. And it was really just working really hard and just years of incremental success that got me to where I'd say by the time I was 40 or 45, I was pretty damn arrogant at that point. I could do just about anything. So I had to get beat up and chewed up and spit out and come to the end of myself to get over that. I've seen both ends of the spectrum, and neither of them are pretty.
So just before you started your business, you had worked through your 20s. Some of our listeners are currently employed by others, and they're thinking about starting a business or are in that time frame. What did you do? Like, what were you doing at that point? And then what was the genesis? Like, what was the spark that got your entrepreneurship started?
Sure. Well, actually, it was so bad that I went into the Army because, again, I was pretty sure no one else would hire me. So I just assumed that the bottom of the barrel. If somebody will take me, it'll be the Army. Sure enough, they did. So I went into the Army band to play, and it wasn't, it was really, we called it military welfare. It was a pretty cushy existence, playing in the military band or the Army band for presidents and that kind of stuff. But that's what I did for 6 years. I didn't even finish college. I just went through 2 years of college and went into the band. And 19 years later, I finally managed to eke out a degree. So I was working in the Army, and while I was in the Army, I began to gain some confidence, and the job was so easy and it was so boring, and we only worked 3 hours a day and not even 5 days a week. And so I just got other things that I got involved in, and I ended up doing, of all things, I was doing, this is really ironic considering where I was coming from, I was doing leadership development and helping other people with how to become leaders in my 20s. I'm pretty sure I didn't hurt anybody permanently, but I'm guessing I did some damage. It's one of those things you don't know you can't do something, so I evolved into that. And I was doing some other things. I had a little landscaping business I was mucking around in, and I just started to experiment because I was bored, and that I began to see the seeds, I think, right then. And so I started my first business in my last couple of years in the Army, and took that with me and went from there.
Oh, that's interesting. That's what I love, is that, there's this cottage industry of people trying to help business owners and trying to help people within businesses, and they really don't have a track record. That's just really their first time, yet they come across as being as an expert. And so it seems to me, that I always find that I always kind of look behind the covers just to see where people have come from, and then where they're coming, what kind of lens they're looking at the world from. And I think you and I have talked a year ago, and I was led to you through some really interesting leadership books that were sort of non-traditional in how one can build a company that really takes the whole picture into mind, is not just pushing money. And I think you come at it from three pieces: money, time, and significance. And I thought that maybe you could spend some time talking about how should someone approach their current business as if they reframe it, or when they're starting, about this money, time, and significance. Maybe you can explain that a little bit.
You bet. The formula for freedom is T plus M equals S. And it's not just for freedom, I would say for success. For a redefined way of viewing success, T plus M equals S. In the traditional world, success is M, money. He who dies with the most toys wins is this bumper sticker from the 80s. And, in the 90s, we got to try that and found it wanting by itself. And then other people thought, well, freedom means time. It's the T part. And so you read the 4-Hour Work Week by guys like Timothy Ferriss. But, the problem with chasing time and money is they're nothing but resources. And some people chase money thinking that money will make them happy. Well, it's just a resource. And then they get to where they've got enough money, they realize, well, that didn't make me happy. Let me see if I can make more money in less time, and it'll be about having a lot of time and being on a beach. And, well, that doesn't make them happy either, because the problem is they haven't answered the question why. Why do I want money, and why do I want time? And that's the S. That's the significance part. And until you answer the S, the T and the M don't really mean anything. You're chasing rainbows. You're chasing something that even if you catch it, it won't be satisfying, because, again, they're just resources. So we have to know, why do we want the resources? And we were asking the why stuff for the last 15 plus years, and it's great to see others doing it now, because back then it was like, what are you doing asking why in business? Nobody asks why are you in business, or why do we do that? It's just one of those unanswerable, mystical questions. And to us, it is the most important, least asked question in business. Why? Why am I in business? Why am I in life? Why am I doing this? That's the significance part. Until you get that piece nailed, it's going to be really hard to grow your business. And just very quickly, that's why we named the book Making Money is Killing Your Business, because the people who chase money rarely make a lot of it. The people who have a reason to make money tend to make a lot more of it.
So you spend a lot more time in this world, obviously, because you work with a lot of different types of business owners. Do you find that people don't spend enough time on the why? So I find that kind of stunning, but then again, I do spend a lot of time asking why.
I would say that's an easy answer. And not only do they not spend a lot of time, most business owners, the overwhelming majority of business owners, don't spend any, zero, duck's egg, nada, no time on why. They're in 30 years of survival mode. I quit my job or I got fired and I started a business because I had to, and I have to pay my mortgage, and so I'm in survival mode. And even when I get to the end of my mortgage where it's comfortable and I can pay it every month, I'm bored. Instead of asking why, I just get a bigger house. And now I have a bigger mortgage, and I have to make more money, and then I do that again, and then I get a helicopter, and then I get an airplane, etc. So we're always living in survival mode, and we're living in self-imposed poverty as a result of that. I wrote a blog post, Inc. magazine, I posted it a couple weeks ago, and the title was basically, yesterday I met a rich self-made hostage.
Are you becoming one?
Yeah, and are you becoming one? Because the guy, it was really sad. He just assumed that money would make him happy. He was rich, which is money, but he wasn't wealthy, which is T plus M equals S. That's wealth. I've got time, I've got money, and I know what to do with them in a way that will add meaning to me and to the world around me. And then no answers that it's amazing, Bill, how few business owners ask that question.
I just find it, maybe it's, a part of it is because of the pace. Well, I think a lot of people complain about the pace of life, but if you look back to old writing from the early 20th century, people were complaining then about the pace too. It's funny. I know the acceleration is more now, but maybe it just numbs people to their life and they just sort of get stuck on the treadmill. But so what I find from your writing is interesting, and I wanted to ask you about some of your blog posts in your writing is geared for the entrepreneur business owner, which of course I love, but I also love the parts where you're talking about employees and sort of the vision of the ideal company, because I find that that's not only compelling to the business owner, but I find it compelling to the employees if they have a vision for themselves as well. Are you intentionally doing that?
Yeah, oh yeah. I don't like business buzzwords, and disruptive is one of those business buzzwords, and so I don't use it much. But we call ourselves disorienting. I believe that adults don't learn unless we're disoriented. And what that means is that if I think I know something, if you start talking about a topic and I think I already know that, I tune you out. But if you come at it from a way that I'm learning something new, or you're presenting it in a way that maybe I don't know anything about it, then I'm open and I'm willing to learn and to listen. And one of the rules of life that I learned probably in my 20s, maybe in my 30s, but I really cemented it in my 40s, is that most of what we accept as true should be regularly challenged, because there's at least a piece of it, if not the whole piece of it, that isn't true. And I could give you everything from seeing the moon on the horizon and why it's bigger to business principles. There's so much of what we just accept and are numbed by that is not necessarily the way things have to be. And the way people work is one of those. The emerging work world is going to radically change 200 years worth of industrialization that we think is normal, when in fact it's a pimple on the face of business, and we need some Clearasil to fix it.
In your book, you talked about the difference between learning and education, and then you just kind of built upon that with, we don't learn. You say adults don't learn unless they're disoriented or stale. So yeah. Does that mean that the discontent and the confusion has to be so deep that then the human being will then say, it's now time to learn? Yeah,
it's a way of, I call it coming to the end of myself. And I can do that on a very simple little topic. I thought the moon was bigger on the horizon. The fact is it's not. And that's disorienting. And that's coming to the end of myself, realizing that I had something nailed, and it turned out to be not true, or at least not the only truth. And then there's much grander ways of coming to the end of ourselves and being exhausted because we create our own pace of life and we created a bad one. And so, yeah, all of that is disorienting to us.
I think part of the question for entrepreneurs is, do they have an issue with when someone says, I want freedom? Do they know how to articulate what that means? Because freedom can, for you, could mean having a couple weeks off, but then going investing some time in Africa helping build businesses. That might be freedom. Do you think people just aren't in touch with what their definition of freedom is?
Yeah, I think what they're not in touch with is their big why. And until they figure out their big why, they don't know what freedom means. So each of us have a big why, and I think we develop it from our early years. We get kicks out of doing certain things with and for people that charge us up and get us going. And we are taught not to ask why, and we're taught to stuff all that. And by the time we're 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years old, we've developed an inoculation against why. And I think it's even stronger the older we are in today's world. If you're an industrial age baby, if you were born in the 40s, 50s, and maybe even into the 60s and early 70s, asking why is something you were taught not to do. So you were rebelling against authority. So a big why, having a personal big why as to why I exist, is really hard for people to grasp. And my experience has been the younger people, guys who are in their millennials, and the more distance you have from the industrial age, the more likely you are to question that stuff and to ask yourself about making meaning instead of just making money. And all of that is a disorientation. You have to be a learner in order to continue to make meaning. Otherwise, you do grow stale repeating the same comfortable thing that you've always done.
Now, as far as what you're referring to about the tyranny of the urgent and sort of the treadmill of life, maybe you can explain for the audience what you mean by the tyranny of urgency in their day-to-day life.
Yeah, you mentioned, Bill, earlier that maybe the pace of life has gotten faster. Bull roar. It appears that way. And I would have agreed with that for decades. But the reality of it is I create my own pace of life. And it's the tyranny of the urgent. The tyranny of the urgent is something that I allow to happen to me. So let's break that down very quickly. A tyrant is a king that you don't want. You didn't ask for this guy. He showed up at your door, knocked, and said, I own you. I'm not asking. And urgent things in our lives are almost always tyrannical.
Okay.
And the tyrannical things are almost all urgent. So I got to pay my mortgage. I got to do my payroll. It's survive, 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 day to day, week to week, month to month. Tyranny of the urgent stuff takes over our lives, and we let it. We allow it. And in many cases, we encourage it because, in fact, the tyranny of the urgent stuff is what pays our bills. I have a lease I have to pay. I have to make a chair. I have to sell the chair. I have to collect for the chair. Now I can pay my lease, and then I do that again all over next month. And that's just tyrannical, urgent treadmill stuff. On the other side of that is the important stuff. We call it the priority of the important versus the tyranny of the urgent. The important things are the higher priority, but the problem is important stuff is almost never urgent. So figuring out how to build a business that makes money when I'm not around, figuring out how to train people, putting processes together, asking myself, where should we be next year? I don't have time for that. I'm too busy surviving. I'm too busy fending off the tyranny of the urgent that comes at me every day. And the problem is that the tyranny of the urgent is much easier to respond to because you can check it off your list. You can finish 15 things in one day, feel very satisfied, go home thinking you actually made progress when reality is all you did was fight off the beast. And you're right where you were the day before. And when you come back next day, you're going to have 15 more things to knock off, and you're never making progress because you're just dealing with the tyranny of the urgent. It is the number one, in my opinion, number one tactical, on-the-ground problem in life, and certainly in business, is how do I stop reacting to the tyranny of the urgent, and how do I proactively go figure out what is actually important and do that? Because the important stuff solves the urgent stuff.
And your example that I took from the book was on building processes. And man, this is like building processes for my business, which is 15 years old, has been like pulling teeth. It's been like slowly pulling apart my fingernails off. It's interesting because I've had to come back to the why many, many times because for me, it's been so painful of a process because I'm just not a process person. I'm not wired that way. I'm more impulse and I'm more chasing the shiny objects. That's just my natural wiring. So what's interesting is the building of processes is one part you made a point of prioritizing versus the tyranny of the urgency. Do you find that business owners have a difficult time with that as one example?
Huge. Yeah, absolutely. Because there's nothing urgent about building a process. I'm too busy doing a process to actually build one. And so I do it differently every time because it's not an actual process. I'm just reacting to the tyranny of the urgent. I need to build a chair, and then the client needs it this way, and I'm going to go find, okay, I need a nail and I need some glue. And you're just you're reproducing, you're reinventing the process every time you do it because you haven't bothered to actually sit down and say to yourself, what's the best way to actually do this on average? And then write it down and then do that. But I don't have time to write it down because I'm too busy doing it. Or let's say I actually do have a good process and I'm very proud of myself, but it's all in my head. And I don't have time to write it down to give it to somebody else to run because I'm too busy doing it. Or, take it another step, I actually am really good at it and I've written it down, but I don't have time to train somebody. So I'll just keep doing it myself. Yeah, but most business owners never get it out of their heads, and that's why we call it freedom mapping. That freedom mapping is the getting the stuff out of your head, through your heart, out your hands, onto a piece of paper so that you can hire maxi-me, not mini-me, and you can find people who are better than you are, and they can run your process. And so ostensibly you are there even while you're gone because the process is running the way you want it to go. Can't tell you how many business owners we've saved with that process, getting down to the point where they actually wrote down what it is they're doing. It is where the rubber meets the road. If you want to get off the treadmill, if you want to build a real business and stop being an income producer and be a real business owner and have the business make money when you're not around, then you have to figure out what are the 3 or 4 or 5 big processes that are really important to my business and get other people to help you write them down and get other people doing them.
And that's called freedom mapping, right?
Yeah, freedom map. We use process mapping as a tool, but the point of it is not to make the process run faster, but to make the human being more free. And we do that. Obviously, the process runs faster and better, but we're interested in the impact on the person. And there's, ironically, sadly, every other process mapping organization we've ever run across never even mentions the human being. There's nothing in it about it. It's all about making the process go better. We want the human being to go better because if the human being goes better, the process will be better.
So from the entrepreneur's point of view, we just covered that. So many of the leaders that are listening in maybe are senior leaders reporting to the either the founder or the CEO. And do you think that they have as much culpability in this tyranny of the urgent versus the prioritization of the important as the
Absolutely. This is pandemic to life, and everybody gets it. The minute you get out of bed, no matter what your occupation or what you're doing, the minute you get out of bed, you're faced with those two opposing forces: the tyranny of the urgent, yelling and screaming and kicking at you and trying to take over your life, or the priority of the important, which sits quietly in the corner and says, "Hey, when you got a minute, let me talk to me and I can help you solve all that crap." So it doesn't matter whether you're pushing a broom or you're pushing the board to get you to do something as the CEO. We're all faced with the same thing, and we're all culpable because we surrender to the tyranny of the urgent, and then we act like somebody did something to us, when in fact we created the rules. We have a training center here in Denver. Across the front of it, in giant letters, it says, "Make your own business rules," because he who makes the rules wins. But we let the tyranny of the urgent, our clients, the business market, the product, our employees, there's all kinds of things that will come at us and attempt to take over our lives. And unless we know exactly what we want out of business and how we want to get there, those things are going to rule us. And we have to realize that in order to get where we want to go, we have to make the rules. And so everybody at every level of business should be playing the business owner's game. And that's where you figure out how to make more money in less time at every level. You freedom map your way out of things that are not the highest and best use of your time. You get other people doing them who would be good at those things, and the whole company runs better. It's one of the biggest problems with senior and middle management leadership is that they think that they add value by taking everything on themselves and knocking off the 15 or 20 or 30 tyranny of the urgent things every day. Look how much I accomplished. When in fact they're killing themselves and the organization around them. They should be distributing all those decisions to others who will feel great about making them and feel more human as a result. And that's really the difference between management and leadership. Managers solve and decide, and leaders train other people to solve and decide, and they get out of the way. Tyranny of the urgent is all management. Prior to the important is leadership.
And I think that that's great to make that distinction, Chuck, because there's a significant senior leadership group that's listening to this show, and I think people lose. I was just having a conversation with a long-term senior IT leader who reports very high up in the organization, and he was getting very frustrated because he felt like his vacation was being compromised, that everybody was bringing laptops on vacations, and he felt like an oppressive culture. And part of it probably was, but he was very frustrated. But it's almost like as soon as I spent some time reminding him, and I wasn't trying to be his therapist, but I certainly could see his he was losing hope. He does have power to reframe, because he is in a senior position. He does have a power to change things in his own way or with his own direct reports. Do you find that often happens within companies?
Absolutely, yeah. They take their cue from the top, and the top is the CEOs driving themselves crazy, and so they think they have to drive themselves crazy. And no, you don't have to do it that way. You can make your own business rules, especially if you have any level of autonomy. And in senior leadership in a business, you're going to have some level of autonomy that allows you to report results and to make deals. And I would do this the two times I worked for somebody else. I said, let's agree on the results we need. And this is how to solve this problem if you're a senior leader or any kind of leader in a business. Agree with the leader that you report to on the result required, daily, weekly, monthly, annually, whatever it is. Here's the results. We all agree together. Yep, this is what we want from your department, division, people, team, whatever it is. We agree on that result. And then the next question is, okay, if I get you that result within that time frame, do you care how I do it as long as it's legal, ethical, and moral? And the response from a good leader is, I'm not going to get involved in your process. I'm concerned about your result. And until you fail on the result, I have no business getting involved in your process. Managers focus on process. Leaders focus on result. So get your leaders to focus on on agreeing on a result, and then create the kind of environment around you that will give you and the people around you the freedom to actually get that result without being driven crazy.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, because I was reading your article on DaVita, the company. I guess it was called it a 65,000 person corporate village, and the name of the company is DaVita. There was an interesting quote you put in there from David. I guess he was the chief wisdom officer. I love that.
Yeah.
And the art of leadership is to know how few decisions to make.
Yeah, well, that's actually something we taught him.
That's great.
That's a statement that came to us years ago that we almost require that leaders memorize. The art of leadership is to know how few decisions the leader needs to make, because, and we don't have time to get into this today, but the industrial age conflated management with leadership, and they are radically different things. Managers assume that their best value is to make as many decisions as possible, and the more decisions that go through me, the more I demonstrate how indispensable I am to this company, and I should be worth more money. I would fire someone like that. I would look for someone who says, I am absolutely dispensable. My best value in this business is to train others to make decisions and then get the blankety blank out of the way. And the more freedom I have to ask questions and think about our future, the more valuable I am to this company. The more decisions I'm making, the less valuable I am to this company.
I love that. That's a great vision to have. Do you believe that there's such a thing as a work-life balance?
No, I don't. I think that's a goofy thing that we've created in a reaction to the factory system that sucked the life out of us 6 days a week, and we carried that on into our own businesses. And a good man works hard, and it's one of those badges of honors that we carry with us. If you own your own business or you're a senior leader, you just work yourself to death. It's just part of the deal. And then we have to talk about having balance. A lot of senior leaders in organizations I talk to, they constantly talk about this thing called margins, that we want to have time in the margin. And that by itself speaks volume. You've got the content, which is business, and in the margins, you might get a little time on the edges for yourself. It's nonsense. First of all, I would suggest we talk about an integrated life.
Yeah.
Whatever you're doing, you should be completely sold out to it. If you're on vacation, you should be completely sold out to it. If you're at your kid's soccer game, you're sold out to that. If you're at work, you're sold out to that. And there's no balance in any of that. It's actually integration. And secondly, there will be times where one of those things can take over everything else. Think of it.
Yep, absolutely.
All you have to do is ask yourself, give me an example of one great leader, any person in humanity that has ever made a giant impact in the world around them that lived a balanced life. From Mahatma Gandhi to Jesus to Margaret Thatcher to you name it, none of these people lived balanced lives. Get over it. The difference would be that there's a time for every season. I got offered to run a company and own a piece of it. They were just going to give me a piece of this company and a big fat salary in the 90s. And there's no way I could do it because I was completely out of balance in raising kids. And there was no way that I had the time and energy to take that on. Today, I'm completely out of balance in the way of work. My kids are 35 and 30. My wife works in the business. And so don't think about balance. Think about impact and seasons of life and an integrated life.
Yeah, I would agree with you that, Chuck. I think it's incredibly stressful, that marketing pitch of a balanced life. I don't know where it started or how it started, but for high-performance individuals, which is most of the people going to be listening, whether they're senior leaders or whether they're entrepreneurs, it doesn't exist. But you're absolutely right. Integration with life, values, and I think, and also the reasons why, but back to your original point, can help out a lot as people kind of look at this and reframe it differently. What value do you think mentors? I want to talk a little bit about mentorship and groups and finding people to model for business owners in particular, but certainly if you see that also being applicable for senior leaders, I'd like to get your opinions on that. What do you think? Do you believe in mentors and groups as a way to learn and fill in gaps in knowledge?
Well, over years of working with business owners and senior leaders in companies, we developed, not by research or by trying to come up with something cute or clever, but simply by listening and reacting to leaders over years and years and years, we found that there's really 4 building blocks to a business. We don't have time to get involved in all 4 of those today. But the 4th one is outside eyes. And outside eyes, I wish I'd have learned this earlier myself. I don't have any regrets, but doggone it, I'm glad I learned it, but I would have loved to have learned earlier that having other people who have no dog in the hunt taking a look at my business and my life and being able to speak to it would have put me forward in ways that I would have never imagined otherwise. And so ever since, I've always had people that can speak to my life on a regular basis, people who I respect, and they don't have to be smarter than me. They don't have to be bigger than me. They just have to be not me and be willing to speak to my life. So mentoring, business advisory, small groups, huge thing. Anybody who joins a small group of individuals as a business owner or as a senior leader, you see exponential growth because we're mammals. We're made to live in community. And business is the only goofy thing in life where we basically run like rugged individuals. It's really a dumb idea.
Yeah, that's interesting. I just, believe it or not, after 15 years got involved with an outside advisory group, and it's made a huge impact in a short 5 months. And I know you've built a group called 3 to 5. Is it called 3 to 5 group, correct?
3 to 5 Club.
Yeah, 3 to 5 Club. Can you just go through a process of, if I were walking into a 3 to 5 Club meeting, what would Bill Murphy experience in a typical meeting?
Yep. Well, there's 3 things that you would get out of 3 to 5 Club. You'd get community, number 1. And that's the biggest one. We ask people, where do you go to say the 3 magic words? There's only one place that we know of, and that's your business community where you can safely say 3 magic words. And those 3 magic words are, I don't know, or I am scared, or a number of other things like that you could never say to your vendors, your employees, your stakeholders, anybody else in your life, even your spouse, because now there's 2 of you not sleeping. Where do you go to do that? And so getting that community, that closeness where you can be transparent with others. I can't tell you the number of stories of people that their businesses have been saved by getting into 3 to 5 clubs and other business communities like that. So community is number 1. And then secondly is training. We have a 15-month, it just happens to be 15 sections syllabus, and it goes over 15 months, and then we repeat it because it's the basics. And we have people who've been in 3 to 5 Club 5 or 6 years who have heard this stuff 3 or 4 times, but every time they hear it, it's a year and a half later. They've changed. Their business has changed. It's an opportunity to sharpen the saw on that focus. And so they'll get training on on every aspect of how to run a business and how to work with people. And then the third thing they'll get out of it is a network. We're not a networking community. So we're not focused on networking. But as a result of being close to people, you end up with a really strong, small network of powerful strategic alliances where your business gets built in very strong ways, much better than being in a networking group where you actually focus on trading business cards and trying to sell each other stuff. So those are the 3 things that you would get out of a 3 to 5 Club. And we started this about 7 years ago, I guess we looked at it 9 years ago because people were saying you can't help small business owners. There's no money there. So we researched how to do it for 3 years and launched 3 to 5 Club in 2006, or 2010 rather. And for the last 6 years we run it. We got 15 of them here in Denver, a few others scattered here and there around the U.S., 3 of them in Ireland, and a scattering of them in Central Africa, of all places. And those have basically been people who have come to us and said, we need this, we want to do this, help us. And so for the last 4 or 5 years, we've reacted to that. But this is the first year where we really feel comfortable. We've got 6 years under our belt. This stuff is magic. It's transformative. And this is the first year where we're really pushing hard to begin to open up other places around the U.S. and the world. We think we're going to be the McDonald's of peer advisory. We think every city with more than 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people in it ought to have 1 to 200 3 to 5 clubs in it.
Well, I'm going to put in the show notes, which I put in every one of the podcasts, I put extensive show notes, and I'll put a link to any of the listeners that want to review the 3 to 5 Club a little more closely and communicate with you directly. I'll put links to that. And just a quick story, I went up for my last, I'm not involved with 3 to 5 Club, as you know, but the group that I was involved with, I was traveling to Philadelphia. This was 4 weeks ago, and I was in a bad space, which, of course, entrepreneurs run into, and it was just issues with hiring, and I forget exactly what it was, but it was just your typical stuff that is day to day with running a business. And I never questioned going there. I knew I was going to get my butt to the meeting, but it was really interesting going in as low as I was going in from a confidence point of view. I learned so much in there from different unexpected ways, not only the curriculum, but just interesting feedback from the other group members about different issues, and I left really much more feeling empowered. So it's really interesting, the power of groups and sort of getting you out of your own funk and out of your own way. And back to the point you had about education and learning, those things that I thought I knew or I knew I didn't know, I didn't have a clue, and I knew I didn't have a clue. So it's good to have a different perspective.
It's always the case when you get outside eyes. When I started taking golf lessons, I figured I knew maybe 20% of what I needed to be a good golfer. And after 2 years of golf lessons, I figured I knew about 2%. It went down. The more I learned about golf, the more I realized I didn't know. And that outside eyes, that building community really impacts that really well, keeps us disoriented.
So one of the pieces that I wrote about recently was, do you want to exponentially better production, focus on people instead? And what was interesting, some of the statistics you had in this blog post, but also because, ironically, I just listened to Gary Vaynerchuk talk. He has a podcast and he runs a media agency of about 600 people or so. And he said that his retooled to go back. He's always had a focus on his employees, but he used the words, he said, I can go faster. We're more productive as a company the more I focus on my people. Like literally, he says he's in charge of HR. And that's from the CEO saying that. And what's interesting, then of course I'm reading your article, traditional business training focuses the leaders on production, but research shows that focusing on people instead is more likely to help your production. Maybe you can just give us a synthesis of what you're attempting to accomplish with this article.
Yeah, I think the factory system was built around machines. And machines aren't human, but machines need humans to run them. But the perfect human to run a machine is one that doesn't have a brain, because all the questions were answered in the building of the machine. The only thing left to do now is run the machine. And so people became extensions of machines very quickly. And that's why and any other question became assimilated with being a rebel and rebelling against authority. Just come to work, run the machine, and leave the humanity at home. We don't need that part. But the research relentlessly over the last 125 years shows every time that when you pay attention to the people, the machines run better. And we're gradually getting there, and it's going to take another 10 to 50 years of solid research on it. But the factory system did not come to an 8-hour, 4 or 5-day work week in order to take care of people. They came to it because the research showed if you gave people more breaks, they were more productive. So instead of having 2 12-hour shifts 6 days a week, have 3 8-hour shifts 6 days a week, and you'll get more done. And so they were nicer to people because they had to, and they found out when they were nicer to people, the production went up, and on and on and on. And for the last 100 years, we just keep seeing the same research over and over and over again, more refined. When you pay attention to the people, they figure it out. So we would never go in and try and fix somebody's assembly line or anything like that, because those are just symptoms of how people are being treated. If the assembly line's broken, it's because the humanity is broken. Fix the humanity and the assembly line will get fixed. And it happens every time. We go in to help someone with their production problem, and the first thing we do is look at how the people are relating, and sure enough, there's a problem with the way the people are relating. We help them learn how to relate to each other. We learn how to make the place more human, and then they figure out how to run the assembly line in a much better way. Focus on the people, and the production gets fixed. And I agree with Gary. The whole concept of HR is a bogus thing. That came from the idea that leaders, good factory people, focus on machines. And yeah, the research is showing me somebody has to pay attention to these people, but I'm not going to be that person. I'm focused on production. So let's create a department of people, and some department can take care of the people. I think in going forward in the emerging work world of the participation age, the number one leadership talent and ability that people will be hiring for is emotional intelligence. And HR will become a function where they take care of the legal stuff and they help people find people to hire, and they do other things like that. But HR, human resource, taking care of the humans, will be the number one focus of leaders at every level of a company.
Is that EQ? EQ,
yeah,
the word EQ?
Emotional quotient, EQ, emotional intelligence. That's really and there's companies already doing that. In fact, there's a company here in Denver, software company that hires, they got a few thousand people scattered around the U.S. and around the world, and they hire their number one hiring thing is for empathy. These are programmers, and they're hiring empathy. And if they don't have empathy, they won't even look at them. It's a human world, and you take care of the people, and the machines run better.
How do you measure empathy, Chuck? I'm just curious, is there a way to measure emotional intelligence? Because this is the second time that we've dived into this with someone on emotional intelligence. I was curious if there's a way to measure it.
Sure, yeah, there's a number of psychobabble tests around emotional intelligence and other ways to do that. But the best way to measure emotional intelligence is to survey the people who are impacted by your existence. And there's a lot of companies doing that. We're doing that now every month. On a scale of 1 to 10, how helpful is John to me? How helpful is John to our team? How much do I want to be around John? And that's emotional intelligence, getting the feedback from the world around you, that the world around you receives you, finds you helpful, and wants you as a support mechanism in their life. That's the best feedback, is simply the other people saying, be with. By the way, that's the difference between management and leadership. A manager calls a meeting, and people come to the meeting because the manager has a gun. You can fire you. That's the only reason they come to the meeting. A leader calls a meeting, and a leader in many of these companies we work with, they've given away the ability to hire and fire to the teams. So they're not able to hire or fire anybody, and people show up at their meetings because they have something to say and something that will actually contribute to my life. And I'm going to go to that meeting because it will make my life and my job easier, because that dude or that woman has it figured out. And that's emotional intelligence. I will connect with them whether they have a gun or not.
Your supposition, though, is that those type of companies actually outperform the average Standard & Poor's growth rate. They actually, It's not just a wishy-washy kind of warm, huggy-feely.
Nope, that's the fun part about this, Bill, is that all of the data, all of the hardcore data is on the side of self-managed human beings, rehumanizing the workplace by giving everybody their brains back, emotional intelligence, taking care of the people versus taking care of the production. All of the data, all of it, is on the side of it. When you do that, production is better. The companies that do that are the ones that are relentlessly listed on the best places to work, the fastest growing, the highest productivity, the lowest employee turnover. You just look for the data, and anytime you see great data, with rare exceptions, it's because there's a company really working and focusing on emotional intelligence. So the data is the best offense that we have against hardcore industrialists who just want to run the machines and think people are dispensable. I'll give you a very quick example of that. There's a company in Brazil that makes washing machines, and they don't have an assembly line. They have 10 people who make a washing machine and 10 other people. They have like 50 or so teams that make washing machines. And they make washing machines faster with higher productivity at a lower cost than anybody else in South America running an assembly line. Henry Ford was wrong. It's not about the machine. It's about the people.
Is that Ricardo Semler? Is that the
Yep.
person?
Semco.
Semco, yeah. That's how I found you, through reading two of his books. Do you call that a certain type of business? Like, what is is it the Chuck Blakeman style business? Like, what is?
We call it a participation age business. I didn't coin that. I didn't want to coin it. I looked out there in the ethos for another term that people were using that was inclusive enough that would make sense. There's a lot of things out there people are calling this age, but the participation age is, even 2 cycles ago, presidential candidates were using that.
Okay.
The hallmarks of the participation age are simply participating and sharing. I want to participate with you. I don't want to be a victim of your information. I want to participate in building a great company, and I want to share in the results, and I want to share with you. So sharing back and forth, two-way communications, and participating meaningfully is where we're going with and Web 2.0 was the beginning of that, where for the first time you could actually engage in 2 directions on the internet. That's why this is now the participation age. And that's why you have companies like Uber, where you can participate in ways that you couldn't imagine before in the economy.
Well, Chuck, I only have 2 questions for you to wrap up, and they're 2 simple questions, but I'm curious. What is the most gifted book you've given in your life so far?
Oh, that's a very good question. I would say probably The Power of Full Engagement.
Power of Full Engagement.
Yeah, we talked about balance before. They talked about full engagement, that working 12 hours a day for your whole life does not make you more productive. You need to take care of your body, your mind, all that stuff. So it sounds like balance, when reality is, again, when you're at work, be fully at work. When you're at home, be fully at home. Be fully engaged. And when you break yourself up that way, and you break up your world and your life into different pieces like that, you're much more likely to be more productive and have a more meaningful life. So I like that book, The Power of Full Engagement.
Okay, excellent. And what if, almost like sounds like presence, just being present with whatever your particular moment.
That's a piece of it.
What about if you had to give, so as you look back, let's say you started from your 30-year-old self, what advice would you give your 30-year-old self? If you could sit down with your 30-year-old self, what advice would you give him today?
2 things. Number 1, spend more energy getting a clearer focus, as clear a picture as I could of why I exist. What am I doing here? Write your obituary when you're 28 and say, here's what I want people to say about me, and then live that out. And the second piece of that would be take more risks. What do you got to lose? Losing your house, so what? You'll get another one. You lose your company, so what? You'll get another one. Life didn't end. I'm writing a book now that is filled with people who were bankrupt and failures multiple times, and no one has any idea. Thomas Jefferson was the equivalent of bankrupt 3 times. Abe Lincoln went bankrupt after he was president. We had like 8 different presidents who went bankrupt before and after. Milton Hershey went bankrupt making chocolate. Henry Ford went bankrupt making a car before he actually became successful. So take risks. You're not going to die, and your family's not going to die. And the earlier you take them, the less you have on the line. If it's just you and you're 30 years old, then figure out what you want to do with your life and then jump in.
Chuck, that's great. I love the obituary suggestion and the taking more risk. And I want to thank you for what you do and the help you give business owners and leaders. And I'm going to link up on our show notes for people that are interested in the 3 to 5 Club, and also in ways to buy your book, Making Money is, I think I got the title right, Making Money is Killing Your Business. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Yep. And if people want to be facilitators for 3 to 5 Clubs, as we begin to aggressively grow those outside Denver, they can go to 3to5club.com. You'll give them that link. But we're looking for people who want to be transformational and missional in the lives of small business owners.
So these would be people that could run and help.
Yeah, they can make a great business out of building 3 to 5 clubs in their own area.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to link that up in our show notes, and I appreciate you for your time and your commitment. Thank you very much. I look forward to our round 3 at some point in the future.
Thanks, Bill. This was fun.
Thanks, Chuck. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I love when authors come on the show because the books that I read and I love hearing the author's perspective. It's a lot of fun for me. So I hope you enjoyed that. You'll find information and all the resources we discussed on the show notes page at redzonetech.net/podcasts. Also, make sure to check out our sponsor, CIO Scoreboard. If you're an IT leader, top decision maker for an organization, learn how to integrate your auditing and compliance objectives with real and practical IT security investments by using powerful visualization tools that remove complexity from IT decision making. Go to visualcio.com to learn more. Again, that's visualcio.com. Until next time, I'm Bill Murphy and I'm signing off. Thank you for listening and have a great day. So there you have it. This wraps another episode of Bill Murphy's Red Zone podcast. To get all the relevant show notes, please go to our blog at www.redzonetech.net/podcast. Additionally, make sure you go to iTunes and leave your comments in iTunes about the show. This helps our show rankings enormously and it helps support the show. Until next time, I appreciate you very much for listening. Thank you.